All right. Thank you for joining tonight. We want to obviously, first of all, welcome everybody that's joining. If you're joining live, thanks for taking the time tonight to hang out with us in the podcast. If you're watching after the fact, we always are grateful that anybody would take the time to watch these. But as always, this is definitely not for us. We don't do this to get attention. We don't do this for any monetary purpose. Our sole aim for this podcast is always to be a resource to you, the listener, the viewer, and hopefully the involved participant. And so use your chat box. We really do welcome and invite and encourage comments, questions, and so we can be more of a resource to you personally. So tonight we are talking about every person's biggest struggle. And there are a ton of things that kind of led to this thought, but just as in way of kind of a like an overarching illustration or opening, I was thinking about how campaigns work, like ad campaigns. And so in the age of like AI, the idea of having this, you know, artificial intelligent companion is like a really big deal. And so you have like this sidekick in your pocket or on your computer that basically doesn't just like answer questions for you. You ask questions, you find things, you research, and like it can actually do things for you now. And so you have more than just a resource for information. You have literally a digital tool that can do things for you. And obviously this is now working into a lot of new companies with, you know, robotics and you know, robots, literally robots, and just creating things that will supplement or in some cases replace people labor. Mm-hmm. And so but the pitch though is kind of what I'm after here. Is the sales pitch is often this is going to save you time, money, effort, all because this is made to be an assistant to you. Yep. It's made to help you. So you got these like interesting taglines for like ad campaigns that come out, and things like, now you have a companion, not a tool, your everyday AI companion. We could even jump away from AI and think about the Dollar Shave Club. Have you ever heard of that? The Dollar Shave Club is like this.
Oh yeah,
really
yeah.
So their whole thing, shave time, shave money, right? The idea is that like we have like high quality things for less cost, build faster when you need it, when it absolutely has to be sent the next night and or be there the next day. And so what they're doing is, you know, they give you this slogan that's, we are solving a problem for you. We are saving you something. Yeah. We are adding time to your day, right? Yeah. And so the goal behind all of these different campaigns is to like make life more convenient and less of a struggle, right? Then, and I have done this many times, ragging on the media and thinking about how inherently and occupationally evil they are with the types of stories they put out there. But then I was having this random, you could call it an epiphany. It probably wasn't much of a revelation as much as just an epiphany. But I think the reason why, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree, but the reason why the media puts this kinds of stuff out is because that's really what we want to read. That's what we want to hear. There's something in our minds that is attracted to death, destruction, mayhem, and drama. And I think that is there. At least there's an element of that in the human makeup that is consumed by problems and consumed by struggle and consumed by issues. And so the reason why I'm saying all that is because in a world so consumed by struggle and so focused on trying to make life easier, to solve problems and relieve time or relieve burdens, how do you know which problem really is the most significant or which problems are the biggest, right? And that's why I called this podcast Every Person's Biggest Struggle, because I really do think that the Bible zooms in on human problems quite often, whether through stories or accounts, I should say, of people who lived and watching their lives just totally unfiltered, seeing all the stupid, crazy things that happen in people's lives or that people do to each other, towards God, and the things that motivated that, the outcomes and consequences. But also there is this very real, similar. I don't want to use the word campaign because it would kind of cheapen the whole thing, but I'll call it an invitation to solutions, real solutions. And I'll just name off a few of them, and then we'll kind of jump into the questions here. But or I'll go back to my main question and just pitch it as the first. But Matthew 11:28, come to me. This is Jesus talking, those toiling and burdened, and I will give you rest. John 6:35, Jesus answered, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never hunger, and whoever believes in me will never thirst. James 5:4-15, is any one of you sick? He should call to the elders of the church to pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will restore the one who is sick. The Lord will raise him up, and if he has sinned, he will be forgiven. And so, and there's a lot of scriptures like this, but they offer this solution, right? They offer this like real answer to life's struggles, many of life's struggles, but they don't necessarily play out often in the way we think of them, right? Hungering and thirsting is not a physical thing. It's more of an ambition thing. It's an intention thing. It's what you're seeking in life. There's a level of satisfaction that Jesus is talking about in believing in him or following him. And so we can talk more about that. And then there was this final point that caught my attention, is that with all of these invitations, it is very possible, and I'd say common, for people to straight up ignore the solutions. Isaiah 28, this is God talking through Isaiah. He says, indeed, with mocking lips and foreign tongues, he will speak to this people, to whom he has said, this is a place of rest. Let the weary rest. This is a place of repose, but they would not listen. And so, again, the world is pitching this ad campaign to solve problems. And people spend tons of money and tons of time learning how to utilize those things to make their lives more convenient and easy, and to free up their own time, right? Or to save money. And then you have real solutions that man, for some reason, has a tendency to ignore. So I'll just stop there and get your thoughts on everything I just said, because I know I said a lot, but hopefully it kind of sent it in a direction. And then I'll ask kind of a more specific question in a second.
Yeah, so the first thought that came to mind was the idea that, first of all, I don't think that solutions are actually what's being offered. I think what's being offered is a marketable product, and that's the priority when it comes to when I was in high school. The first thing they taught you in marketing, I don't even know if they teach that in school anymore, but it was that all businesses, all being the key word, all businesses were in business to make a profit. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point of business. The whole point of business is to make a product that sells so that you can make money. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of finding solutions, I don't think, is really the actual goal. The goal is to find a problem that you can address in order so that you can make money. Yeah. And so it's not, I know that sounds almost like, kind of playing word games, but it's not really, because it doesn't matter then what you make. Because as long as you make something, and that something sells, and that's why you've, over and over again, I've over the years of my life, even, whether it's a real thing, a real genuine success story, or just something that is said, it's the number of times that I've heard, hey, you could make a lot of money doing this. That's the goal. Isn't, wow, just think of all the people that would benefit from this. Just think about how valuable this would be. Just think about how this will be so helpful to people. That's not the issue. The issue is, I could make a lot of money out of this. And if it helps people, great. That's a bonus, if it actually helps people. But if I can get people to buy it and they think that it's helping them, that's good enough. Even if it isn't helping them, that's good enough, as long as they're buying it and I'm making a profit off of it. And so you have that. That's kind of the first thing is, and so the intention is really not to help, and the idea, and it's sad really, because there are people, I do know people personally who have followed a path, a vocation, because their desire was, I'm going to use this to help people, but then they become disillusioned once they start on that path, because they realize that's not what's really happening. It isn't about helping people. It's about meeting quotas, having things happen so that money can be raised, and that is the goal. And so anything you might think, if I did this, it's going to be very helpful, it's going to be very valuable to people. At some point, somebody somewhere is going to come into your orbit, and say, no, you got the wrong goal here. The goal is to make money. And it will be switched around, whether that is a company that you become competitive against, who decides they're going to put you out of business because they don't want you to be competitive with them, and your idea is a good idea, and so they'll put you out of business so they can kill your idea. They don't care about your idea. They care about competition, and they care about making money, and so they're going to kill you so that they can make money. And that is every company, it's every business. There's no such thing, as a business that is, genuinely philanthropic. It's not, unless it's a non-profit, and that's why we have non-profits and why we give benefits to non-profit businesses, is to encourage that, because you need something to encourage people. But often, even within the non-profit, the idea of, I can start this non-profit and I can write all this stuff off, and so I'm making money at it. And so it's still not a 100% surefire way of, getting people to really genuinely help people. So you have that, and then you have the Bible and the Word of God, and they're not, it was almost, cringeworthy for me to hear you say, to try to make the comparison between the two, that the Bible also provides this kind of thing, and it's like, this is the night and day difference between the two, because these are genuine solutions, and they are solutions without cost associated with them. It's not like you have to do certain things, in order to have so Jesus isn't going to benefit from your benefit, like you're talking about, praying for people, and then recovering. Well, so you do that, and that's what happens. It's not like, you didn't read the fine print. No. You have to do this and that and the other thing, and that's how we gain, how we profit off of your healing. It's not there's not that kind of a thing. It's not associated with that. And it's funny because you hear, churches are just after your money, and it's funny because honestly, the church doesn't. Where do you think the church gets its money from? It gets its money from donations. People have to just give you money. And I know that companies are very jealous of that, because companies really wish that they could do that they could just get people to just give them money, because they don't understand that there's actually something being, given. There is a benefit that's coming from this, and the reason why people are giving like that is because of how it's benefited their life, and they want to contribute so that other people's lives can benefit as well. And so, so there is money that flows in through the kingdom of God, but it's in order to be able to help people. It's not, we don't, especially in our fellowship, in our fellowship, we have, in our church, we have me. I'm the only person who financially benefits. And at this point is not even that. But our church in Tucson, 1,000 people, and it's probably got a staff of, 10 or 15 people, that's actually on their payroll, actual payroll. How many companies do you know that have 1,000 employees and only have 20 people running the place? It's not, it's way more than that. But so the other thing too is the actual, like I said, it's an actual genuine help as well, because these things, like you mentioned, Jesus saying, all you heavy laden, I will give you rest for your soul. And I've experienced that. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to have rest for my soul, with everything going on right now, looking for a church building and the number of struggles that we've had talking to the city, talking to the cities like, talking to AI, there's no difference between the two. Both of them are heartless. And it's sad, it's just really sad to listen to it. Oh yeah, no, I know the problems that you're having. I know the difficulties you have, but I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do because this is just how zoning laws work. It's like, no, this is not how zoning laws work. This is how Redwood City zoning laws work, but it's not how every zoning law works. I mean, I can go to practically any city in the state or any state in the country and get a church building, with very little hassle. Not in Northern California. In Northern California, it's like, oh, you want to do what? You want to meet with people. You want people to come to your building, and you want to do things with people. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have any place for that here. If you want to sell people stuff, no problem. Yeah, no problem. We'll do that. But we don't just meet. You just want to just get together. And it's almost like they don't understand what that means, getting together. I had because I've heard this a number of times. I was told, can't you find a church that you guys can just kind of, swap services? And it's like, oh yeah, we're just a meaningless, useless piece of group of people, right? And that's like, and I told them, I said, that's like going into a retail store and saying, why don't you just ask them if you can sell stuff too while you're here? And it's just like, just trying to get them to see reality, how important, how valid it is, and how many people are helped. The world has been changed by Christianity. The world wouldn't be what it is today without Christianity. I'm not talking about religion. I'm not saying with religion. I'm saying with Christianity, which in essence means with Jesus. The fact that Jesus came to the earth, forgave our sins, and has given us eternal life, all at his expense. We wouldn't even have the freedom that we have today if it wasn't for that. And freedom isn't a man-made thing. It's a God-given thing. Freedom comes from God. It doesn't come from man. And so you have these kinds of things that go on in life, difficulties in life. And I can say personally that I'm glad I'm a Christian in the middle of these things, because it's not my burden to carry. I'm literally not carrying this burden. It's not something. I don't lie awake at night thinking, what are we going to do? Where are we going to meet? It's like, God, you are, your yoke is easy and your burden is light. Cast your cares upon him because he cares for you. And I can do that. And I can put these things in God's hands, and God will make a way. There will be a way. Just like when Abraham took Isaac to offer him as a sacrifice, it's a whole nother conversation that we don't have time to get into. But as they're going up the mountain, he says, I have the wood here, Dad, and we have fire, but where's the offering? And he says, don't worry, son, the Lord will provide.
Yeah.
And they get up there and the provision is Isaac. There's nobody else. And so he, lays Isaac down, ties him up, gets the fire ready, and goes to plunge the knife into him, and which is God himself. It says the angel of the Lord, but it's talking about God. Says, stop. Okay, you've proven you're not going to withhold your son from me. Look over there, and over in the thorn bushes, there's a ram. It's stuck. It's got its horns caught in the bushes. And he says, offer that, and so there's the sacrifice, but the whole time there's no worry, there's no concern, there's no, oh my God, it's going to cost me dearly, I'm going to pay a huge price here. It's like, no, God is the provider. And there's a reality in that. The problem is that most people just won't take it that far. They're going to go jump off and do it on their own. But if they put their faith and their trust in Jesus, watch him come through, watch him help, watch him provide, you realize, wow, this does work. Christianity does work. Real Christianity does work, but you have to take it all the way to the end. You can't, just say, oh, okay, well, I'll do it God's way until I get nervous, and then I'll do it my way. It's like, no, you're going to jump in and do it your way. Okay. It's not going to work. So that's a big difference, I think, when
Yeah.
you look at it, the two, that there's nothing the same about either of them other than the fact that they're both offering something,
Yeah.
and that the one is offering something that it's not going to give and doesn't even really want to give, and the other is offering something that not only does it want to give, it is able to as well.
So let's talk about this from a consumer perspective. I'm using that word on purpose. It's is it, don't you think it's kind of interesting that, like, for everything you just said, this is funny because, like I said, these are all campaigners. They're actual, companies actually have whole departments devoted to campaigning and marketing their product. And I've seen that on some levels in the corporate world, and seeing how they market things, how they word things. And I've seen products that are advertised before they're even ready to go. Like they're talking about this product, they're talking about all the things it's going to do and can do before it's even finished. And so we don't even know if it can do these things. It's actually being advertised with its intentions, not necessarily with its capabilities.
Yeah.
And so from a consumer's perspective, do you think this is an issue of people being willfully blind, or is this like being willing to just be taken advantage of as long as it, like, at least appears to serve a purpose in our lives? Or what is the attraction to, products like this from the standpoint, or when you're considering the big picture, the fact that these really aren't going to solve any problems in my life. They're not going to give me any real solutions, but you know what? I'm going to drop dollars on it. I'm going to spend a ton of time on it.
Yeah, I think, well, no, see, what I've said is just simply the truth, but the reality is that most people live a lie. And so they actually believe that these products are going to do what they say. It's funny, the number of companies on Amazon, that you get a little card, in the box email. If you send them that card and you tell them, you're open to testing.
I know where you're going with this.
They'll sign you up and send you free products.
Yeah.
All you have to do is give them 5 stars.
Yeah.
You give them 5 stars, and maybe, if it's not that great, well, maybe 4, and as long as you give them 4 or 5 stars, they'll give you free products, and you get all kinds of weird stuff. It's funny, the kinds of things that I've gotten, and there's been a couple of times where it's like, we're just going to send this to you because I've done a handful of different things, but I won't give it. I'll just send it back if it's not a legitimate product. But the number of people that just to get a free product, they'll be, well, I'll give them a 5-star for it. Sure. What do I care that other people, it's fine. They'll complain. Oh yeah. You can't really trust these reviews, and then give those kinds of reviews. It's like, and then complain about not being able to have honest reviews. Yeah. It's funny. It's just because it's like, well, this is me we're talking about, we're talking about me and my life and what I want, and all that. And so the criteria becomes very, very different, and so we can convince ourselves that things are helping us that are not really. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the funny thing is, it's funny when you're and this is part of the problem, is that when you're young, when you're in your 20s, and you're hearing these kinds of things, you're thinking, yeah, well, I need more time in my life. I need things to make my life easier. But then, like, you get to be my age and you realize these things have not made my life easier, and they have not given me more time. It seems like it, because now that I have more time, I have more responsibilities. And that's the problem. I think about, like having a cell phone. I couldn't imagine living without a cell phone. Yeah, but think about, for those of who are older would only understand this, but think about how much easier life was without a cell phone. You could be in the gym, and you're in the gym and nobody contacts you. You just finish your workout. And everybody in the world that tries to get a hold of you knows that they can't get a hold of you. And so they're not upset with you for not answering. But I called you 3 times. And that was my big rude awakening when I came back to the States in 2008. Is I came back to the States and I got a phone. I had a phone when I was in England. We actually had phones in England before they had cell phones here. And so I was quite comfortable with having a phone, but life there is very, very different. People are not demanding. And so I get here, I get a phone, and I'm texting, which I hadn't been doing much because that used to be the 9 buttons. It's like, my kids could do it. Say kick, yeah. And I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do that. That's just this is painful. I mean, even now texting is painful. It hasn't gotten much better, actually. In 20-something years, it's still just as crappy as it was back then. It's like somebody needs to really come up with a way of doing texting a little bit better.
Yes,
but
it's called talk to text.
Well, yeah, I know, but so
click, talk, done.
Yes, I'm going to be out in 5 minutes. I'm just going to the bathroom right now.
I don't think unless we start being able to telecommunicate to our phone, we're not going to be able to.
No, well, I mean, I don't have any answers for it either, but I think it's funny that it's just we want to keep making phones. It's like phones were like this. They're going like this, and it's like can't get any smaller than this because our thumbs aren't any smaller. But so I get here and this is somebody even in the church, got all upset. Said, I sent you a text and you didn't respond. And I said, and?
They must not have known you very long.
It's like, so what? You send me a text, so I'm obligated to send you one back? Especially when you haven't asked me any question. You just, Pastor, I'd like to talk to you. I'm looking at my phone. I'm thinking, well, we have church tomorrow. We can make arrangements tomorrow. I don't need to respond to you and tell you this. But I do need to respond and tell you this because our world has decided that you have to do this. You have to. So now what you used to not have to do, now you have to do. And so it's so that's another thing piled on top of your life that you have to do this. And I just decided I'm not going to live like that, And so if people are going to get all bent out of shape because I don't respond to their text within 10 minutes of sending it. Obviously, if it's important and we've been conducting business or something like that, and I'm sending a text. But if somebody doesn't get back to me, I might try to contact them just to make sure that they heard from me, and that it didn't end up in the ether somewhere. But I'm not sitting there thinking, for crying out loud, what's wrong with these people? How come they're not responding to me? Taking it all personal. It's like, it's like, listen, people, have lives. That's the whole idea. You have a life, and that's why you're texting them, because you really want this, and you really want this right now. But you know what? Not everybody lives for you. Okay. So you may want this right now. And if you want it right now and you've texted and they're not available, well, you're going to have to come up with another idea because you can't expect them to partner with you in every little tiny thing that you do in life. But that's the world we live in. And so it's not saving us time. So all these ways of communicating and the internet and texting and getting texts on your laptop, it's just everything, it's just like, I'm a tech, I love all the technology, but I hate all the demands that it has placed on people's lives, and people just, there's no such place, oh, you're going on vacation. Well, don't forget to bring your phone with you because I may need to contact you. It's like, you know what? My phone is going to be in my hotel room. And when I get back to my hotel room, I will see if I want to talk to you. Yeah, it's crazy. And so that's the thing about technology and well, not just technology, but things in general, things that are supposed to be making your life easier. They really aren't. When it comes right down to it, they're really not making your life easier. They're actually making your life. They're just giving you more time to do more obligations. So you're not really saving time. You just have more obligations. It's nothing now to do. The whole idea of multitasking. And people, I'm. Nobody even brags about being able to multitask. Because it's a requirement now. Everybody has to multitask. It's not, oh, I'm so good at multitasking, I can do 5 things at once, 10 things at once, or 20 things at once. No, you're just doing what everybody's doing, It's not a big deal anymore.
So let's kind of start drifting towards the differences between some of what you've already talked about, but more from, again, the consumer slash beneficiary, because I don't think the consumer is going to completely benefit here, but and which is an important thing I think maybe you can touch on a little bit, is what type of person actually does benefit from the solutions in Christianity.
Oh, in Christianity,
Yeah.
what type of person? One who's breathing. I would say that's the minimum criteria in order
You
to
have to be
benefit.
living.
So you have to
You have to
be
be
living.
living.
Yeah, you have to be alive.
As a person when they're dead?
No.
Okay. So should I rephrase the question? What type of person? So we know they're living. We understand they're living.
There isn't any criteria. That's my point. There isn't any
Yeah.
criteria. They just have to be a person. That's the criteria. They have to be a person. Yeah, there isn't any criteria. The benefits, see, because it doesn't, but Christianity, it doesn't provide things that you can buy. It provides things that you can't buy. That they're not for sale. You know, nobody can provide them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is the thing I think is so ironic about evolution, is this idea that, you know, you can think of human beings like any type of machinery, you know, and there's just, we're nowhere near there. And even with all the technology that we have, we're nowhere near. Technology is never going to become sentient. It's not, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to redefine sentience. That's what we're going to do. We're going to redefine it. And so it's kind of, it seems to me that there's sort of these two lines of thought that are trying to converge to each other. One is that human beings aren't all that great. And two, technology is amazing. You know, and they're just trying to bring these two things together. When you have a you know, a useless human and a useful robot, they're going to be the same thing, you know. And so that's, you know, that I think is the kind of mentality. But if you just stop and think about, you know, what a human being is and the benefits we already have, you know, naturally, you know, by God's design in our lives. And it's funny how, you know, evolution again, it tries to say that it only appears like there's a design. And I was talking to a very interesting, very honest, but it really started to give me an understanding of things. Well, actually, I was talking to you about somebody else. That's what it was. And the idea of, you know, when you find a painting of the Mona Lisa, you know somebody painted it. And the idea of, well, we don't know that for a fact, you know, and it's like, it's a realm that we're going to go, you know, the world is going to go into that realm where there's no evidence, but the mere fact that we can think that it's not necessarily the case that it was painted by somebody. Now we're in a realm of, quote, possibilities, but we're not in a realm of possibilities. There's no possibility there. Just because you don't believe something to be the case doesn't make it a possibility. It just simply makes it, you know, a hypothetical idea. It's a you know, what's the word? A thought experiment. It's just a thought experiment, but it doesn't go anywhere, and it can't go anywhere because there's no way for it to go anywhere. And so the idea, you know, of this is just silly. And so, you know, the benefits of being a person, being a human, already describe the benefits of God, mm-hmm. You know. And so the fact that it's contained in a book, in the Bible, you know, is just simply, you know, it's just simply enumerating, you know, what is already there, you know, what God is already doing. And, you know, we have a grace, all human beings have a grace that we don't have to believe in God in order to benefit from the gifts of God. But there's also gifts that are reserved only for those who will put their faith and their trust in God, mm-hmm. You know, who will actually take it to the next level and actually do something, you know, with what they've been given.
So before we go into that specific type of person, what what is the deal with the person that would not listen? Like what he talks about Isaiah 28, that he provided this place. Actually, let me just like broaden this a little bit, because I was thinking about, everything that God provides, knowing that, I've done this. I've benefited. I've seen miracles happen in my life, and then turn around and live life my way, and totally turn my back on God. And I've seen other people do the same exact thing. They come into church. They, quote unquote, what we call get saved, and they start living a life of faith and obedience, and they're walking in a certain way that's much different than what they were, and all of a sudden you see like this, there are, I mean, genuine, I'm trying not to use like, the word you've used often, Christianese. I'm not trying to use like spiritual lingo here, but like miracles start happening in their lives. They start getting like, jobs they didn't qualify for, and they're getting, reductions in rent, or they're getting really great housing opportunity. I mean, they're seeing blessing in the material world,
right?
And then there's just moments where, not moments, obviously there's gradual decline. And then there's a time where they just pull back. They're gone. They take that blessing and they just run with it.
Yeah.
And they do their own thing. Adam and Eve did exactly the same thing, right? God provided all of this for free, for absolute free. They didn't do anything to get it.
Yeah.
God said, all of this is yours. It's for you. Mm-hmm. Have at it. Just don't eat this.
Yeah.
And they ate that anyway. And but God gave it to them knowing they were going to do that. And so like tell me more about that type of person. Why is it such a struggle for mankind to just, be grateful for what God's actually giving them?
Yeah, because, and I've said this several times, is because God has given us a brain that's much more powerful than we can control. And that's the problem, is that you look at look at how, I'm just as guilty as anybody else. Look at how much AI has become a part of our daily life in such a short period of time. I get ideas. I just get ideas, and I think, hey, I need to throw this at AI so it can become a reality, and ideas for applications or things. I've got probably half a dozen applications just in the last week, 2 weeks, that I have, because I used to write. And I mean that. I used to write applications, and it would take me months to come up with one application. And then with AI, now all of a sudden it's like, with AI and just a little bit of direction, I can have the same thing knocked out in a couple of hours, and so it's like, it's just become my go-to for everything with AI. And it's just how we are, it's just the nature of how we are, is we gravitate towards things that are bigger than we can handle. It's just the nature of things. And so you get all excited, you think this is great, this is wonderful, God's doing great things in my life. And rather than being grateful, you want more. And more and more and more and more and more. And it's like, yeah, okay, fine. Okay, great. I got a really nice car. I got a really good job. I've got a family. I've got, all the things that I've ever wanted. I know, but you didn't give me this. And so I'm going to go look for that elsewhere. And that's what ends up happening, is they're looking for that elsewhere, whatever that may be. They're looking for that elsewhere. And I've watched it. I've watched people do it. And like you say, they gather up all their blessings, and they basically walk over to the restroom and throw them into the toilet and flush the toilet, and then go, okay, now what was that thing I was looking for? Oh yeah, that's right. I'm going to go look for it now. And then they don't realize, wow, everything I had is gone, and they don't have it anymore. And they don't understand. It's like, I don't understand why this is the case. I don't understand. It's a mystery to me. People who have had direct encounters with God and have said, I don't believe in God anymore. I don't believe in God anymore. It's such a, if you think about it, it's a funny phrase. I don't believe in God anymore. If somebody came up to me and said, you know what, I'm sorry, I just don't believe you exist anymore. I'd feel sorry for them, because it's like, life doesn't work like that. Just because you make decisions in your mind about things doesn't make it reality. It just makes it what you think and nobody else. And when what you think takes precedence over what is real, well, now you have problems. And the problems are going to be that you can't make your unreality that only exists in your brain reality. It doesn't work. You can't do it. And so you're going to basically crash and burn. You're going to reap the consequences of it.
So you mentioned people who take it to another level, that this idea that God has reserved certain benefits for those who take it to the next level and actually start, I think you used the word giving, or I didn't actually note that word down.
Put your faith and trust in.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry. And so what does that really look like in
putting your faith and trust in God?
Yeah.
Well, I can, it's we're looking for a building for our church. I've had nothing but trouble with every corner. I've looked at dozens of buildings. It's funny because I have to, people say to me, have you tried? And I'm like, yes, I have. Anything that you can think of? Yes, I have tried it. And people sending me links to buildings. It's like, why didn't I look on LoopNet? Stupid. I should have looked there first rather than just walking down the street. What do you think I've been doing? And it's getting closer and closer to the time, where we have to be out of this building by the 30th. So the new owners can come in and turn it into a shop. And nothing more I can do. I've talked to every person on the planet that is involved in getting buildings for churches, and we're not getting one. And the one I talk to every day is the one who I've put my faith and trust in, which is Jesus, is that he will provide. He is Jehovah Jireh. He will provide. I know he will provide. And what will he provide? That I don't know, because I'm not Jesus. I'm not Jehovah. My ways are not his ways. His ways are much higher than my ways. I could complain and gripe and talk about how God, you really should be doing it my way. When I know that that's not the case. It's not how things work. And so putting your faith and trust in is, I'm not going to lose sleep over this. I'm not going to get upset when people ask me 15 times if we got a building yet. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to gripe, because I understand that their concerns are that they haven't learned to do that thing that I'm talking about, putting their faith and trust in Jesus and saying, God's going to help us. He's going to take care of it, and just pray. It's all, no, Pastor, you need to take care of it. You need to do something so that this works. It's like, we don't need Jesus. We need you. Okay. It's okay. I don't know if you recognize that I really don't have what it takes, but I really don't have what it takes. And so, so that's, out of personal experience, realizing, hey, my back is against the wall and I've got no way forward unless Jesus does something. And so I'm okay with that. I'm okay to live like that.
So what does that look like in the beginning? So we're talking about like fresh start, let's.
Well, see, that's the thing, is in the beginning, it's so much easier because your life's already jacked up. Getting saved is like, okay, now I can start putting this back together again. And it's like how I feel about my garage. It's like, if I can just get some time, I can't wait. I want to, because there's some things I want to do in my garage, but with all this moving around and stuff, where I've got to put it on hold. And my whole life I'm thinking, okay, June's coming, or May's coming, if I can just get through April, I'll be fine. Get through April, get my taxes paid, get our building moved, and yeah, I'm good. And then May I can start actually thinking about doing things. And it's like, that's how I felt when I got saved. It's like, now I can do things. Now I have, it's because it's not time, it's brain, now I have the brain to be able to do this. And so in the beginning, it's a lot easier, because it's like, I know, all the stupid things I was doing, I don't need to be doing anymore. I can do something productive with my life, rather than doing nothing of any value.
Right. So how does that how does a person begin that type of road? I mean, let me give some more criteria here. We talk often about the difference between, religion and those who claim to be Christians but aren't and or don't live like a biblical Christian. They don't follow the ways of Christ. They've stayed the same for years, whatever. Mm-hmm. But then there's another road, which is a true believer. It's somebody who's fully convinced to the point of letting that faith change their lives.
Well, this is the thing, the using of the word believer, I do use it, but when I use the word believer, I'm talking about somebody who's not really real, where most people use it to talk about, the real thing. But the reason why I don't like to use the word is because that describes nearly everybody. I'd say, I don't know what the numbers are now, but at least 90% of the world believes in God, and so they're believers. But like 20% or less of people actually go to a church, go to church, who claim to be a believer, in God. And it's like this, that was, Jesus came to this earth to build his church, so we should be in it. If we're following Jesus, then we should be in it because that's what he does, but yet that's not the case. And so being a believer in my mind is this doesn't mean anything. It's not describing anything. It's I met Jesus, when I got saved. I met Jesus. He came into my heart and he lives inside of me. And he's been living there for the last 40 years. And I haven't kicked him out. I haven't put any rules on him. I haven't tried to make him pay rent. I haven't tried to get him to co-pilot with me. I just, you're in my life. What do I do? You're here. We live together. How do I live? What do I do? What's your will for my life? What's your purpose for my life? What do you want me to do? And I've found it. I found it many years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. My purpose on this earth is to bring other people to Jesus, and I don't have any other purpose outside of that. There are I am a pastor and things like that, but that's also part of living for God, is working at the place where I know God wants me to be so that I can minister. I don't have any difference in my approach to business and work anymore being a pastor than I did when I was working at a company. When working at a company, I was the pastor, of that company. I was there to minister to those people, to pray for them when they needed prayer, to try to, to be there for them for when their hearts would open to Jesus, and be able to try to bring them to salvation, to teach them, the truths of God's word, and try to inspire them to follow Jesus the way I'm following Jesus. And nothing's really changed as far as that goes. That's always been the case. And that's, in my mind, that's the right definition for a quote real Christian, is one that understands that there's not life and then there's belief in God. That was what was so frustrating talking to the city, as I talked to a guy from the city this afternoon. One of the frustrations is because people just don't understand that, they know people who are Christians, and they know they go to church whenever they feel like it. And so they think that's how everybody is, that everybody just goes to church whenever, and it's not true. Real Christians go to church all the time. They're regularly there, Sundays, Wednesdays, other times when other events are going on. They're there. They want to be a part of it because they're a part of a Christian community. They're not just going to church and part of a secular community, and they know each other, and they get together outside of church, and it's not like work, it's not, I actually know people who are more faithful to work than they are to God, Christians who are more faithful to work than to God. But, there's so much more to it, so much more to Christianity than just believing, and having a deep belief. Okay, you've got a real, genuine belief. There's not like I claim to believe in God, but I really don't. and then I claim to believe in God, and I really do. That there's no such thing. If your claim is just that you believe in God, well, then you're probably going to be somewhere floating around in between. I'm very dedicated, and I'm not very dedicated, but that's a whole nother group of people, because the others are, I have met Jesus. That's the group. I met Jesus. I know Jesus, and that dictates how I live my life, what I do.
Okay, so how does somebody, like Jesus says, come to me, all those toiling and burdened or heavy laden, and I will give you rest.
Yeah.
What does that mean, come to me? Jesus is not walking the earth physically. How does a
everybody
fresh
knows
person...
how to do that? That's a pretty basic thing. Is coming. We know how to come to God. We do it every time we get in trouble. We know what to do. Oh God, if you'll get me out of this, I'll become an altar boy or something. It's always, we know when we're in trouble, we know what to do. We know how to get a hold of God, and that really is it. Just not waiting until you're in trouble. Just making the decision. No, I'm going to live like this. I'm not just going to call out. And it's funny if you think about it. People who do that. They call it foxhole Christianity. When your life's on the line and nobody can help you and you're going to die, well, who are you going to call? You're going to call, Godbuster. It's not, it's...
Took a second for that to register. I'm almost outside of that age range.
And so it's, we know what to do. We know what to do. We know how it all works. The bottom line is we want our freedom. We want to be able to make choices on our own. We don't want to surrender our will to God. We want to keep our will for ourselves and have God too.
And so is that the type of person that God is talking about when he says, but they would not listen?
Yeah. These are people that what he means by would not listen is that they prefer to exercise their free choice over intelligence. They would rather be able to say, listen, I want to choose even if it's the wrong choice.
So let me go back to the beginning of this podcast for a second. What is man's greatest struggle?
That's your job. You're the one who came up with the topic.
No, I just ask the questions. That's all I do.
You said man's greatest struggle was the topic. So you have to know. Man's greatest struggle. That's hard to quantify. Well, what I just said, man's greatest struggle really is will, self-will, more than anything else. One of the things I can say, even from the most devoted, genuine of Christians, this idea of will and being able to abandon your will it's difficult for many people. And I hate to try to put myself out on some kind of pedestal, because I'm not the only one like this. It's just something that you only discover by doing, is that when you surrender that to God, you genuinely surrender. You don't tell God, okay, Lord, I'm surrendering this. No, you actually surrender it to him. Like this whole building thing, I know I mentioned it a couple of times, this whole building thing. I actually prayed, a couple of months back, I prayed and was praying and saying, God, I'm struggling with this. This is difficult, but I want to know the Lord that provides. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to do what I can to get a building, but I am not going to worry about it. And I am not going to, bend the rules in order to get a place. And I'm not going to do any of the things that are human effort, that when you get into a situation like this, I'm not going to do those things. I'm going to leave this in God's hands. And I'm going to pray for his direction. And as we get closer and closer to the time, I'm going to be asking the question, what do you want me to do? I'm not going to be saying, okay, I have to do this, I have to do that, I'm going to have to do the other thing. What do you want me to do? And leave it at that. And, and I have every confidence that I'm going to see Jehovah Jireh, the Lord that provides. And, there's no doubt in my mind that God is going to provide. Yeah, and the truth is, this isn't life-threatening. We could always rent a hotel. It will be inconvenient. to meet at 15 different hotels so we can have services on Sunday. But whatever it turns out to be, however things turn out to be, the one thing that is going to very much be there is that I'm leaving it in God's hands. I'm not going to, like I said, bend the rules, try to make things convenient, try to make things good for me, because I'm here to help people. I'm here to help people to get closer to Jesus and have a relationship with Jesus, and that Jesus can work in their lives. I'm not here to show people that if you put your faith and trust in Jesus, you'll be wealthy and you'll have no problems. That's not Christianity. Christianity can be difficult, and where that difficulty manifests itself is when it comes to our own will. What is the lower limits of what we're willing to accept in life? That is our biggest struggle. Is I'm not going there, I'm not doing this. And when I first got saved, I had to deal with a lot of that kind of stuff, because now that I'm not smoking pot and I'm not drinking, I'm a respectable human being. I'm not going to be working those stupid fast food jobs anymore. And I would work fast food. I would work any job, when I was taking drugs, because nobody would hire me stoned, so I had to get jobs where they hired stoners. And it's like that was because I was a stoner. And so now I'm not, now I'm respectable. And God made it very clear that no, you're still not respectable. You've been delivered, and there's a difference, and you need to learn that difference. And I did learn that difference, because I ended up working a fast food job right after I got saved. That was my first job after I got saved, was a fast food job. And then I did that for several months and said, okay, God, I'll just do whatever you want. And God said, yeah, now we're on the right page. Now we can start doing things. And then God began to work in my life. But what I have been noticing is, in the last several years, God has been showing me he wants me to trust in him, not in what he can do, but in him himself. And so I'm excited about that idea, because there's nothing I want more of than to be able to live like that. It's been my heart's desire since I became a Christian. God, I really want to be able to live the way that they lived in the Bible and the New Testament. I want to be able to have that kind of faith and that kind of trust, where I'm believing you, to supply, to move, to heal, supernaturally working through my life. And and that happens. I wish it was 100% of the time, but right now it's not 100% of the time. I'd say, I don't know, 60% maybe or so. And so that 40%, I'd like to grow. I'd like to get closer, so that's my hope, is that, as time goes on, that will become more and more of a thing in my life.
Very cool. Well, we'll end there. I don't have any more specific questions. I think I'll be honest with you. I actually didn't expect you to say will. But I did, for some reason.
What did you expect me to say?
Oh, I thought you were going to give the Sunday school answer, man.
Which is?
Sin.
Sin?
Yeah. I don't
well,
know.
That's the thing is that.
But when you mention will, it's almost like when will is dealt with, sin.
It's funny that you thought I would give a Sunday school answer. Me of all people, knowing how I am about Sunday school answers.
I didn't think literally you would say that, but I was just like, he's probably just going to say sin. No. You're much deeper of a thinker than that, and I appreciate that. That's actually one of the reasons why the podcast is enjoyable doing.
Well, that's, but that's real Christianity. That's kind of what I'm talking about. That's real Christianity. Real Christianity is for deep thinking people. It's not for shallow thinking people. Shallow thinking people don't do well as Christians, because it's too easy for them to get discouraged. Because this has got to happen, because the Bible says it's going to happen. They don't take the time to think, is that really what the Bible's saying? Does the Bible say God's going to give you money, whenever you need it? Is that really what it says? Or does it say something else that you've interpreted to mean, God's going to give you money?
Yeah.
So you have to be, you have to be a deep thinking person. We were created. God gave us this to be able to use. It's like I always say, it's like, I know it's offensive, but God didn't just put a brain inside to keep our head from collapsing. There's a use for it. It's there for a reason.
Well, learned. Very cool. All right, that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining. We will be back again next week. Pastor Ford talked quite a bit about our building situation, so we are moving. But we'll still be doing the podcast. Everything will be normal for those regular listeners. And again, thanks for joining, and check out more of our resources online. And if you can and are willing, join us again next week. We'll be here then.